of the Easy is a story about decisions and how they shape our destiny. After writing Between Shades of Grey, I needed to take a little bit of a break from such personal and emotional subject matter, and New Orleans seemed like the perfect place to hide out. My introduction to New Orleans actually came through a vintage pair of opera glasses that I received for my birthday. The glasses, still in their original case from the jeweler in New Orleans, were engraved and dated as a gift from someone named Willie. I'm crazy about history, so I actually hired a researcher to trace the origin of the glasses, and I learned that Willie was a woman in the French Quarter. And the jeweler who sold Willie the glasses, he was poisoned. He ate a dozen oysters in the Quarter and kicked the bucket. My fascination with New Orleans was born. Then, on one rainy day, I jumped into a bookstore to avoid getting wet, and I saw The Last Madam, A Life in the New Orleans Underworld on display, and I snapped it up. The book chronicled the life of New Orleans Madam Norma Wallace. I read it in one sitting, fascinated with every single detail. And fast forward 12 years, I'm standing on the sidewalk in front of the gorgeous home of the author Christine Wiltz, and she spent the day with me discussing madams and gangsters and how brothels ran their business. Meeting Christine was such a highlight, and I couldn't have written the book without her. I took many trips to New Orleans and met with people who had an intimate knowledge of the underbelly of the city in the 1950s, and the meetings were both fascinating and terrifying. Scandals, murders, crooks, and crime, all beyond your wildest imagination, and as a writer, I loved it. I also spent a lot of time at the Williams Research Center in the French Quarter, and I combed library archives, college archives, newspaper archives. I walked Josie's paths that I describe in the book, from her little apartment above the bookstore, where I imagined the bookstore to be, all the way down to the brothel. I hung out in bookstores and in the soda shop where I wrote that early scene with Josie and Jesse. And I spent a lot of time just roaming the French Quarter, all hours of the day and night, sometimes doing nothing more than just listening to the sounds of the city. When writing a historical novel, you can become totally obsessed with research. They call it research rapture, and I had it. I had research rapture. But I wanted to go a step further. I wanted to include historical details and elements that weren't often represented. So I included the writer Lyle Saxon and the musician Smiley Lewis and places like Morning Call. The most incredible part of my research was being able to visit the former brothel of Norma Wallace. The house in Out of the Easy is based on Norma's, and when I started researching the book, the house was in really, really rough shape. But as I continued writing, someone bought the property and they began to restore it. And then on my last research trip to New Orleans, I decided to take one last drive by the house, and it was completely restored. And one of the residents actually came out and invited me in. And standing in that old house, it all came to life. I walked up the stairs to the girls' rooms, and I could hear Dora and Sweetie's voices. I could hear Willie yelling from downstairs. I imagined where she hid the black book and where she'd count the money. It all came to life, and that house is just simmering with secrets. I chose the setting of post-war America, and specifically 1950, because I wanted to capture that celebrated yet painful time period in a novel. Following World War II, America experienced unparalleled prosperity, but what was the American dream for some became the quiet nightmare for others.
When he was gone, I was practically a prisoner in my own home. I couldn't get out to see my friends, couldn't take part in PTA activities. I couldn't even shop when I wanted to.
People kept secrets, and sometimes what looked perfect on the outside was quietly rotting on the inside. Societal pressures to conform were severe, and there was so much tension. And people escaped those pressures in different ways, and the alluring "come hither" of New Orleans was one of them. But for some, the sizzle of the Big Easy was more than they could handle, and it swallowed them whole. The setting of 1950 also allowed me to explore themes of perceived perfection. The 50s are rich with nostalgia, but what we don't often see is that they were selling perfection hard. The perfect housewife with the perfect dress, the perfect shiny car, the perfect appliances, the perfect house and children. Everything was perfect, perfect, perfect. But in many ways, it was the perfect lie. The more I researched the 1950s, the surface sparkle faded to reveal a fair amount of pain, and learning of that pain helped me create characters like Willie and Patrick and Jesse and Josie, who are all full of secrets, but they're also quietly full of love. And then to contrast that pain, I created characters like Cokie and Charlotte, Forrest Hearn and Miss Paulson, beautiful souls whose kindness and encouragement plant seeds of hope that eventually sprout courage. Years ago, I was part of a mentoring program for young women, and I met women who were swept into the dysfunctional current that was their home life. But I also met women who made difficult decisions to separate themselves from a negative environment, and that's incredibly hard. And those women inspired me. They taught me that we can learn to fly, even if we're born with broken wings. And the idea of that broken yet beautiful bird became Josie Moraine. Right now, there's someone out there who's about to put on shoes that are going to take him in the wrong direction. We all know how easy it is to make a bad decision. God knows I have made so many. But who knows? Maybe, just maybe, they'll make a difficult decision to step out of the easy.